Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to EUA's webinar on the results of our survey on Erasmus+. Really pleasure to have you here, and before we start the webinar, I have to provide a few housekeeping advices. I think we are recording this session, so be aware of that. If you have any question that you would ask, you can do that in the Q&A session, in the Q&A section. There is also a chat in which you can communicate to everyone participating in this webinar. And you can also post information there, links, whatever you want to share there, but questions only in the Q&A section. We will have a presentation here, which I will run through, but every now and then we will check for your questions and take them up and try to answer them orally or in writing. I think these were the main points. And I'm sure the question will come, yes, we will share the presentations afterwards. With this, I think we start. So this is about the Erasmus midterm review survey that EUA run. Can I have the next slide? And I'm sorry, I just have to get my... And I'm not here alone. I will be joined in a second by very knowledgeable colleagues. I have Stephan Geifes here, who is the director at the German Academic Exchange Service of the department that actually deals with Erasmus Plus, and the DAAD is the national agency for Erasmus Plus in Germany. And I'm also joined by Sabine Pendl, the director international from the University of Graz, and by Geneviève Cochez, who is the Erasmus institutional coordinator from the University of Ghent. So very knowledgeable and experienced colleagues who will help us to better understand some of the findings that we present here today. I think you all know the background. It's all about the interim or midterm evaluation of Erasmus Plus that the European Commission is undertaking. We had a prelude already last year. The EC collected some preliminary feedback, but soon there should be an announcement of the actual consultation, which will be to the general public and also to specific stakeholder groups. So this should soon be announced, and this is then an online consultation. And in view of this consultation process, as in the past, EUA has run a survey to higher education institutions across Europe and also a bit around the globe. We had the survey open from December 22 to February 23, and we're really pleased to receive responses from 49 countries, 33 program countries, so good coverage of program countries, and also 18 partner countries. In total, 500 higher education institutions, assuming that many of you contributed to the survey. Once more, our thanks. This is really great that we got so many and so many complete responses. There were 140 alone out of Germany. Special thanks to Stephan and the DAAD for promoting the survey so well in Germany. We have checked the results and ensured that what we display here does not have a German bias, so the German responses align quite well with what other institutions among Europe responded. Interesting as well, and important to understand, while EUA represents universities, we covered really a diverse group of higher education institutions. So in addition to universities, there are also colleges, music, and art schools. So to start this now, and just to clarify also that this is just a first webinar that we run here, where we present some first and quite general results on Erasmus+. Others will follow and after the summer holidays, and then we will also very soon in the autumn publish the report that you will all have access to. If I should summarize the general perception of the Erasmus Plus program among the higher education community, I think this is what we can say about it. So it's very well perceived. Higher education institutions unanimously acknowledged that it offers good mobility and cooperation opportunities. So we are really close to 100% here. And they also believe that it is quite successful in addressing the priorities that it had set itself, namely to enhance inclusion and diversity, and to contribute to democratic life, civic engagement, and the values. As you can see, we have there with 90 and 82% relatively high figures. A bit less so for environment and digitalization, but also still very positive. Probably this is also the moment when I can first turn to my colleagues here and ask whether this reflects actually what they see in their surrounding. So starting with Stephan, probably, is that what you get as a feedback also from the German higher education institutions?
Yes, that's it. That is what we think the program is approved as in Germany. Erasmus Plus has become a synonym for international exchange and cooperation. And I experienced it during COVID when people and the press called here in the DAAD. They called for Erasmus, but it was for all things we are doing in internationalization. And I think that's a good news for us that Erasmus Plus is a brand for internationalization.
And Geneviève?
Well, as an institution like Ghent University in a smaller country, for us it remains the most important external funding instrument for our exchanges, of course, but also for our educational cooperation projects. We also coordinate at Ghent University. And of course, staff and student mobility remains a motor for internationalization, and the Erasmus program is still the top one program for us in that way.
We have these very high numbers on inclusion and diversity, and also on democratic life, civic engagement, which is, of course, at the heart of mobility and collaboration. Any thoughts why environment and digitalization is not so high? Is that because it came in relatively late and is more recent as priorities?
I think that it comes from the side of the practitioners, that maybe digitalization, and if you're dealing with Erasmus, has somehow a bitter taste. And when it comes to environment, to actually travel green, what is green, how to transcribe it then to the actual events might be might cause some difficulties. That's maybe why the numbers are a little bit lower here.
Okay, let's head on to the issue. I talked about positive things so far, and I continue now positively, but we get soon to some of the challenges. So, I mean, start with the good things first. Generally, there is a high level of satisfaction with the work of the ESEA and also of the national agencies. We see that across all countries, and so there was no country where we had a major issue. There are also no major problems, apparently, with the rules and processes of the Erasmus Plus. Where it gets tricky is when it comes to digital processes and procedures. I mean, without spoiling the excitement here, I think this is the one key issue where we found out that things don't work so well. And I mean, to illustrate that a little bit, you have a graph here. I don't know how well that can be read, but to start to look at some of the issues, we asked, would you agree that some of the processes and instruments work reasonably well? And the respondents are very much divided on that. 49% yes, or yes to some extent, and another 44% said no. But it gets even more negative when we asked about whether the processes and procedures, the digital processes and procedures, are robust and reliable, there only 25% say yes fully or yes to some extent, whereas 57% say no, they are actually not. And one point that has been made by quite a few is that the new digital tools have not been sufficiently consulted. It's not easy to assess that. You have about the same number that says that they have been consulted. Well, it's 44%, whereas 45% say that they have not been consulted. So it's almost even. But I just mention it here also as this was one of the recommendations that we, EUA, highlighted in the 2016 midterm review, consulted properly. And then what the only or the main positive aspect is here when you ask them about how digital tools are deployed by the national agencies, and there you can see 67% actually think national agencies do that quite well. And we also asked them about the ERC. There we got a lower number. It's only about 44%. So going to the next slide then. When you dig a bit in here, then you find out that one of the issues that is particularly difficult is the beneficiary module. Most institutions face problems there. And if you ask them, they also think that the mobility tool, which was in place before and which is still used in some program, worked much better. This is 93% who think that this is the case. 73% also think that the Erasmus Plus app is not really helpful for facilitating student mobilities. It gets a bit better when you come to the online learning agreement. Principally, the majority finds it useful to have this and thinks that this is a useful addition to the Erasmus Plus app. 80% think this. But then respondents are pretty much divided about whether it actually facilitates recognition well. So again, it's about even. 49% think it does, 51% think it does not. The most positive response that we got here is about the Erasmus Without Papers dashboard, which 70% said worked about okay. So what we see as a general challenge here is that there are problems with achieving interoperability between the different tools and systems, and that this, and we know that also from the comments that many of the respondents provided, that this results also into a lot of confusion and a lot of extra work for the institutions. To end also here on a slightly more positive point, institutions expect that this might be temporary and that this will actually improve. We asked them, for example, about whether they think that the Erasmus student card would work better than and would get fully functional in the near future. And the majority actually believes that it does. But we have also to say currently only 30% of those who responded actually use the Erasmus student card. So there is not much experience, actual experience they can draw on. So I stop here again and look at, probably to start with Sabine here.
Yes, these two slides, first of all, they're very interesting and they surprised me a little bit. What did not surprise me is that the feedback from the national agencies was very positive, because we from the universities feel that these are our partners in crime. Yeah. This start of the Erasmus new generation was probably the worst I've ever experienced. And you already mentioned this, and it is reflected in the feedback that the tools had not been tested before. And not only the tools, but also the interoperability with us, whether we use the online learning agreement, the OLA, or the Move On or Mobility Online. So while we are working, we are only testing all the systems. And this, I think, is a very sad situation, because now finally all the students, they want to be mobile, they want to go abroad, but in institutions, a lot of time is not dedicated to these students, to the services to them, but to surviving with IT problems. And not only in the offices, other offices like IT offices have to be involved as well. And they do not know why now they are dealing with this situation. And just one more aspect before I hand over to my dear colleagues is also the feedback was sometimes very positive, but maybe this is also the case. The institutions might have been smaller. If I have 50 agreements, then I think Erasmus, here we go. But if you're larger with a couple of hundreds, then you simply have to try to survive. And when it comes to the big confusion, it's also the terminology. Because you mentioned the online learning agreement. Is it OLA? Or are people then talking about the actual digital learning agreement, which, once everybody understands it correctly and it works, can be a great and fantastic tool. And even in the Commission's guideline, there's a confusion about terminology. So a lot of chaos from my perspective, but I'm handing over, and thank you.
Okay, then Geneviève, would you comment? Would you support what Sabine said?
Yes, I support what Sabine says, and we are as well a large university with large numbers of exchange students going out and coming in, and we are lucky to have a well-functioning in-house system to manage our mobilities, so that we didn't need the beneficiary module in the first place to manage our mobilities at the beginning. But that there are still larger problems also with, for instance, everything that has to deal with the BIPs and the beneficiary module and the linkings of the ID numbers and outgoing students and so on. That's a bit technical, but it's still a problem there. And of course, with the online learning agreements, as you might know, we are playing an active role in EWP consortium, but we are at the project side of the topic, but also a higher institution who is directly affected by its developments, and we see there some progress coming on. It takes some time, and it takes a lot of efforts from all colleagues in the office, but also in the faculties. So it's a work in progress. We are very positive and optimistic that this will work. And we still have some other issues. For instance, on the European student card, at this moment, we don't see an advantage for that, as we are going to a digital student card system in Ghent University, and this is still a paper card, so we don't see the benefit for it. But that's in a nutshell on digital tools. So we can.
Yeah, thanks. I think the promise of the student card is, of course, also that it would go digital, that this does not have to be a physical card in the future. But I know, very good comments. And I also noted down what you said about smaller institutions. We saw generally in the survey that smaller institutions are often in a more difficult situation, but on this particular point, it might be different. There is one question here that, more comment that somebody says it's very surprising that there are no major problems with rules of procedures. This is not what, at least in Germany, Erasmus institutional coordinators experience and think. Now, what we said is that overall there seems to be no major problems with the programs. That is a general finding. And we explained that also because a lot of the program activities are not particularly new. They have been used already under the previous program generation. But particularly if it comes here to the digital tools and whatever runs and rules and processes with that, this is, I think, overall seen as problematic. Maybe one more question on this. Any explanation why the dash line, why that is seen so positive? So this is the one thing that works then? Sorry, the dashboard.
Dashboard. Perhaps do one general comment, if you allow, Michael.
Sure.
The digital, there have been huge expectations for digitalizing all our work. And we have three different things we have to distinguish. On the one hand side, we have the IT tools for the administration. Then they have the European Student Card Initiative, the Erasmus Without Papers, and then they have the European Student Card. This is perhaps a little bit too much to be handled at the same time. But we are doing progresses within the schedule, and I'm personally updated every week on what is the situation within the agencies and the feedback from the higher education institutions. And we are waiting for a major new release in this summer and hope things will be becoming better. Concerning the European Student Card Initiative, Erasmus Without Papers, I think the situation has improved as the deadlines are not any more compulsory, so this is less pressure. The very good feedback for the dashboard is specifically for those higher education institutions who are working not with third-party providers, and so there is not the main problem of the interoperability because it is working within one system. So this proves that this can work if everything is coordinated, and we hope that it will improve so that we can really take the benefit out of it. But we have to. What we discussed is to form has to follow function. That we have to take first the processes we have in the international offices, and then to digitalize them, and it would not to change them by the digital concerns.
Okay, so also looking into further improvement of that. There's another question in the chat, what means satisfaction by the Erasmus Plus dashboard? No, we didn't differentiate between exchange of the ILA and the LA between different dashboard users. I mean, our survey obviously didn't go in so much detail. So I think the points are taken here, not enough testing, need for improvement, and probably also for some ways of working with and around that at the moment to bypass some of the challenges.
Can I just comment very quickly on one? It's difficult for us an institution to explain why we even need additional funding, more and more, just to come to the bare first step of the Erasmus, because from the universities who are used to deal with Horizon, their research flagship, they think that it should be compared, the educational flagship Erasmus, but Erasmus, since it was such a chaotic start and still is, that we need additional human resources, financial resources. This to explain within our institutions is not an easy task. So I fully understand this comment which was given. Sorry for jumping in on that.
And I think that's also one of the points that we will make in our report, because that has been said by several of the quite many respondents, that this needs more resources, and it probably aligns very well with the general observation that some people think that digital saves work, and but first of all you have to invest, and that's what we face here. Okay, then let's have a look at the mobility programs, and we looked here at the KA 103. So the intra-European mobilities, but also at the KA 107, the international mobility, the international credit mobility, the program that is open pretty much to the rest of the world. And again, main finding is that there is the results for KA 103 intra-European and KA 107 international, they very much align. There are some differences which I will mention here. The main difference is that on the KA 107, you have more, you will see that there in the graph more, the blue box, which says, I do not know. And we don't really know, is that because maybe it comes from universities which do not use these programs, or they do not have yet enough experience on them. But the findings align quite well. For example, that they are attractive for outgoing students. I mean, 100% confirm that for the KA 103 intra-European, and also for the ICM. There we have only 8% which say that it is not, which I found kind of interesting why that is. And it's also similarly positive for incoming students. 98% say it's positive. And if we deduct the do not know answers for the KA 107, we get about to the same results. So very positive. And there's also overall satisfaction with the program. No institution says actually that it will not continue to use the intra-European mobilities, but some say that they do not know yet. But again, very small number, and it's the same for the KA 107. So there are a few more do not knows and a few knows. So what I think we can conclude is that the programs are quite attractive for in and outgoing students, and generally that physical mobility remains attractive. But I should mention here, we also got a quite positive response to the blended intensive program, which institutions don't see as a replacement, but really as an added on. So there is no indication that there will be less mobility or a decreasing interest in the mobility opportunities. Then just, can I have the next slide? Then if we look on how mobility is managed and funded, starting with the management, there is big satisfaction there. The satisfaction levels are quite high, so 80 to 90%, depending on what you ask. So there's the general feeling that the interinstitutional agreements work relatively well, requirements are appropriate and also sufficiently flexible. And we also saw there's a very positive turnout on the support received from the national agencies. Again, the main burden here is the beneficiary module. And that's actually an interesting contrast. There's an interesting slight contrast between the KA 103 and the KA 107, whereas for the intra-European programs, we have a relatively high number, 73%, which say that it doesn't work. For the international, for the ICM, it's only 46% who say that, and 29% say it actually works, as opposite to the intra-European programs, where just 19% think it is work. Again, as for the previous slide, the main difference between KA 103 and KA 107 is that we have higher numbers of institutions which do not know, which have no opinion about this issue, possibly because they don't use it. And if we look briefly at the funding, that was an interesting finding that surprised me, actually. And I just wonder how contested this will be, because the majority of the institution actually said that neither the number of grants nor the actual grant ceilings would be an obstacle for participation. Financial rules are assessed rather positively, and they seem to be sufficiently clear and easy to apply. Now my screen is gone. I can't see my screen anymore, sorry. But I try to continue it then by myself. So just a second. And so the main point is here that the institutions overall are satisfied with the funding rules and levels, but nevertheless, it's a bit more than 1/5, actually almost 1/4, that say that they encountered problems with the funding issues here. And again, if we make the comparison with the KA 107, the number of do not knows is higher. And there we also got this interesting comment that the available funding matches about outgoing student demand, but that for some in total, but that for some regions, outgoing student demand clearly exceeds the available funding. So I hope you can, Sabine?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I was just wondering if I'm all alone now, and my screen is also back now. It was totally black for a while, and I thought I'd maybe just speak to myself. So good to see that you're still here. So yes, probably starting with Stephan then.
Yeah, 2 comments from my side. I'm astonished, as you, Michael, that so many people think that the grant level is not an obstacle for mobility. From the discussions within the national agencies from countries where parents have less opportunities to help their children, in addition to the grant, they say it is a major obstacle. And we see in Germany, as we have raised the grants, and we were very generous with the top-ups of EUA opportunities, we have a high increase in the demand. So I think this is the proof that inclusion goes through higher grants and top-ups in order to make it possible for students to go out. There might be an effect of post-COVID too. It's difficult to analyze it, but the grant level is, to my conviction, very important. And the second comment on the funding, that there seems to be for 22%, there seems to be problems with the funding rules. This would be interesting to see whether this concerns the novelties or the existing things. And we have some novelties where the fine-tuning, for example, the BIPs, we are changing things, and the Commission is very attentive to what we are saying, what the institutions are saying, and we are trying to simplify. So I'm not astonished about 20%, and I think it mainly concerns the novelties. But the colleagues from the higher education institutions are perhaps better placed to comment on that.
What we presented here was really about the Erasmus physical mobilities. It was not about the BIPs. I just mentioned the BIPs here. We have extra data on the BIPs, where we would confirm also what you said, that there are some problems still there. Yeah, but Sabine, yeah.
It's the same for how to calculate the 20% for the international dimension in KA 131. Is it the initial budget? Is it the latest budget? We have discussions on that. So there are also novelties where the funding rules have to be checked and defined.
Okay, very clear. Okay, Geneviève.
Yeah, just on KA 131, I think the grants at this moment in our region are quite have been risen as well, and we see a positive effect on that as well. The differences between K 171 and K 131 in appreciation perhaps could have something to do with the other ways of handling the different actions. And less students are involved in K171 than in 131. So the beneficiary module, for instance, in that thing is not that a problem. But we think that the K171 still remains a bit and gives uncertainties to as well institutions, students, and our partners, as priorities change every year, and there is still this project-based application almost for that type of mobility. So we would prefer to see some alignment with 131 and an easier way of have access to the funding there.
Yeah. So you would confirm the finding that we had also about the regions, that for some regions there is not enough money then? And
Yes. Well, in overall, it's very positive that since many years already, Europe has reached out to the other regions in the world. That's very positive for us, as we see very much um, our students are willing to go outside of the classic Erasmus Plus zone as well on mobilities, and that there is funding. It's also very good, but funding could be somewhat more structurized as it is in the K131. It's very easy to ask for the funding, to make it clear to our students what will be available and not. And with the 171, it's a more difficult process for us.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. Sabine, do you want to come in here?
Yes, also about money, of course. Also for me, it was a big surprise that the amount of grants seems to be not an obstacle, especially since there was, for example, with ESN, they did a housing survey, and there it showed that 12% of the students, they said no, they cannot go on their planned Erasmus trip because housing was now too expensive. They cannot afford that. That the 171 action, so Erasmus outside of Europe, is so positive, is also nice because this is something we can present when going abroad all of a sudden. Now Erasmus also means something for our partners outside of Europe, okay? Before that, it was just us in our little nutshell, but now we can offer something. That's why it's very attractive. And something out of finances, the BIPs that were mentioned and which are very positively also in your feedback. I think with the BIPs, there are other difficulties we are facing in the institutions. Because just to give you an example, sometimes national regulation when it comes to enrollment might cause a problem that student will just get a certificate but not a transcript and stuff like that. But we are working on these issues to make it more important and more prominent because it's an attractive scheme here.
Yeah, we don't have much detail on the BIPs here, but we will do that probably in one of the next webinars. If I should summarize it, it seems to be fairly popular with institutions, but they also say there is much more work attached to it and much more challenges than one would have thought at the very start, you know. And so that's probably also what Stephan said with the new things that come in and bring then up also new problems. Just about the issue about the grant, I mean, we will look at the question once more and really think about what could be behind it, because we also found it surprising and had thought first, is it then also because Erasmus has been made more inclusive? I mean, there have been measures launched to enhance the inclusivity of Erasmus, so the top ups and but they can't be behind it. I mean, that's not enough money to bring a real change then when it comes to inclusion. All right then, good. Then I think I carry on, and we have a last point here which we wanted to discuss here today, and this is about cooperation, precisely on the KA2 cooperation partnerships. Again, 100% are happy with this as an attractive opportunity for collaboration in Europe. And what we found interesting here, that a relatively high number, 82%, also saw that as an good opportunity for collaboration beyond Europe, despite the fact that the program is not eligible to international partner institutions. So I don't think that they get money from that. And again, also it is seen as a good way of engaging and exchanging with society. So if you look at the responses for exchange and collaboration beyond the higher education sector with industries, NGOs, and 95% say this is actually useful, 52 fully, and 43 to some extent. There are very few no's there. Looking at the management, again, overall, people are quite happy with the management of this program activity by the NAs, by the national agencies, 49% fully, 31% to some extent. And the same goes basically for the selection process. For the applications, it looks a little bit differently. So if you sum it up, 75% think it's worth the preparation time. But if you break it down, only 30% say that fully and 62% to some extent. And it's 85% which said there are actually no major management problems with this action. Again, it falls into 40% fully and 45% to some extent. Looking at funding then, here it's 1/3 of the institutions which says that the grant sizes are not sufficient. And then we also asked them about the lump sum approach, and not specifically from the KA2, but for the entire program. The opinion was that only 56% found the rules for the lump sum approach sufficiently clear. And the point was made that if you ask them about the unit cost approach that was before used in most of the programs, this was seen as much clearer. But on the other hand, if you ask them, the institutions also comment back that for the unit cost approach, the staff cost ceiling were far too low. So there are clearly, it's not easy to read that. We looked at the lump sum approach a bit more in detail. And if I should sum up the positive points, that would be they're easier to manage, there is less administrative burden, and it helps to cover real costs. This is what more than half of the respondents answer. And the rest does not say that it doesn't, but the majority of the rest, as you can see in the dark blue here, says they don't know. So probably because the lump sum approach is also still very recent. And all the rest of the options that we offered here, we got pretty divided opinions. If you look at, for example, at the issue of problems with internal accounting, problems with internal audits, problems with external audits, you have you have about half of the institutions which say, yes, there is this problem, and the other half more or less says no. And what is interesting here, that a large amount of institutions says, actually, we don't know. So if you sum it up in the question, lump sums or unit costs, what is actually better for you? About the same number supports the unit cost, which is 22%, as the lump sums, 23%, but 56% actually say we don't know yet. So a large number of don't know, and it's probably also because institutions have limited experience so far, also, for example, with internal and external audits. So, Geneviève, I think you wanted to feedback the experience that you have made at Ghent University. I mean, you look at it with quite some detail.
Yes, well, we have a small team dealing with those type of project actions within the office, and I know that my colleagues were at the beginning very well, they didn't have enough information on certain actions, and of course, the lack of information session and concrete information within the session on this for lump sum type of funding was not helping to decrease the workload. On the contrary, the increased workload at an application stage, and the uncertainty at that moment already also on how to report and how to do final payments And also the fact that information was not clear and the handbook was not out yet. It made us also it made us fill out the questionnaire as well on the midterm review, as we don't know, because we are quite hands-on those type of projects, but at that moment we didn't know, and there's no more clear there's a more clear view at this moment now. So things are improving, but of course the number of projects and the financing of those projects uh, within a smaller region like Flanders, it is quite problematic at this moment. So we have to put a lot of efforts to convince professors to engage in that type of project, given the workload, given the uncertainties, and the small chances to be selected. Then we see that our staff in the faculties are not very eager to act in that way and to engage in that type of projects at the moment. Although we have a large and historically we have been active in those projects since many years, and have some experience. And my colleague who's dealing with that has told me some insights. Has given me some information. I'm not the expert on it, but I was here to give the information to the audience that it's a work in progress, and it takes a lot of efforts of the staff to engage in it.
Okay.
Although they are important type of projects, and we see the cooperation projects, but we are also engaging in capacity building projects, which are very important for us also to engage towards the global south countries, and so
which are also on a lump sum
yes,
approach now, isn't it?
Yes. And also the different approaches of the Commission towards a different type of actions, like within Key 8.2. It makes it more complex, and you have to have dedicated staff in the national office or to deal with it. So that's just the experience I want to share.
Okay. Good. Yeah, no, I think I sympathize with that. We also submitted a project application, and we face some of these uncertainties. The question is that whether that can be overcome, and whether in some time we have actually an approach that brings in a bit more flexibility. And this is how I would also read the results so far, because there were very few negative, outright negative approaches, responses to the lump sum approach. It was mainly dominated by uncertainty and do not knows at the moment. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Then I think this was the last slide I had here, and we could look once again at the questions which were raised. Or did Sabine or Stephan, did you want to say something about cooperation?
Just there are uncertainties, but when I look at the comments, with the uncertainties with the internal procedures, is the same picture we have at the national level when we are working with lump sums. So this is not astonishing for me. And when discussing with institutions who are engaged in centralized actions, although who do not have the lump sums now, want them. So I think it's a new field. It's with new rules and uncertainties, but I think it is the way where we have to go, and really to put the impact on, to measure the impact and the results of the project, and not to look in the budget details and all these small things. But it takes time.
Okay, good. Looking again, are there any questions which we didn't answer? There was one colleague wrote, I can't support the inclusion comment. We have seen a significant rise in students applying for disability top-ups. Also, the social factors matter. We have indeed had students who were not able to afford a mobility because they had to quit their jobs. But I think that is what we probably that confirms what we have said, but maybe not so explicitly. So that I think it's important to make the point that the top up really probably makes the whole issue of inclusion and equity and disadvantages that student might have in participating in the program, that this makes it more visible and that institutions respond better to it. Maybe that's something that can be supported, and that the top-ups also can be of some help. I think the point that we made here is that it doesn't solve some of the general problems that, in particular, if you move as a student to capital cities, you will find yourself with house prices, house rent that is far too high for what the Erasmus Plus grant would allow for. Okay, we just have a few conclusions here, which I then say. So what we would take away from here is that Erasmus continues, of course, to be of crucial importance for higher education institutions. And this is something that we would, of course, take forward not only now for the midterm review, but also for the discussion on the next generation of the Erasmus Plus program, which should start very soon and is actually linked to the midterm review now in a way. So we think that there are no major problems, at least with those parts of the program which have been in use and tested for quite some while, but this extends definitely not to the digital processes and tools, where we can see that this results at the moment in a lot of extra work and frustration, and also in need for more resources. And I think that point was made very clearly here with the panel. And then another point is that on mobility, we can clearly see there is also post-COVID, there is no indication that physical mobility enjoys less popularity, and that the virtual mobilities are more seen as an add-on, not as a replacement. We would have to look closer into the issues of grant sizes, and also how much the top-ups ensure actually inclusive mobility. And I think apart from students who are disadvantaged, generally the question is how inclusive and available Erasmus can be for all students. And I think we concluded on the cooperation on the lump sum approach for cooperation, that there are some concerns and there's need for better guidance and clarifications. But principally, we have no reasons to believe that it is not fit for purpose. A question, I wrote that down here for cooperation, but I think it goes probably for all. Where do we go with the grant sizes, whether for cooperation or also for individual mobilities in terms of rising prices and inflation, and with the commitment to carbon zero, prices for travel are also likely to rise. So I don't know if that is discussed already at your institutions or at the DAAD. Anything to comment on this from you, or anything to add to it?
Well, then I just start for the final round. Yes, we all hope that the administrative burden, we will overcome this big issue, and that we can focus finally on the mobility of students. Financial issue, yes, they will remain here, but we are all positive, and Erasmus is a brand, will stay a brand. Let's hope for the best, but so far there were more problems than positive aspects, and universities had to co-fund a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
I can agree with what Sabine is talking about. Indeed, we encounter some problems with the management and the tools of course, it remains the most important program for us for exchanges and cooperation. But perhaps when we are talking about the midtime review, we are already talking about the future as well. And so to provide timely information to through the national agencies and would help, because now we were faced at a certain stage at a very quick start of the program without having everything already figured out, and the new actions, certain like BIPs and so on. It took some time to convince our colleagues about it, to make ourselves informed, and so in the midterm review should already give some information about the future as well, and to avoid problems like this, information communication is crucial.
I think we will highlight this and definitely in our response to the midterm review very clearly. All right. Does anybody actually know when the midterm review will start? Because we haven't seen yet a date for this. Nobody knows about the launch? No. Okay. If anybody in the audience knows, maybe you could put that into the chat, then that would be great. Okay. Stephan, sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, I share these conclusions and what the colleagues have said in the midterm review. It's also an opportunity for looking for the second part of the program, but also for the next program generation starting in 2028. And something I take from here is it's about the budget profile that it's in Horizon. We do not need as much money at the end of the program. We need it right from the start on, and also in resources to realize these novelties, which have really been well accepted by numbers, at least, by the institutions. And I think this is something that shows that the co-creation process of this program generation was a success, and I'm quite convinced that we will go through the same process for the next program generation.
Yeah. Did I hear you correctly? You said we don't need so much budget from the start on, or?
Sorry, that was if I said that, it was wrong. I would wish a budget profile which is more linear as in the Horizon program. So we need the money from the beginning on.
Yes, good.
Not as much money at the end. Thank you for having listened to me and corrected it.
Good. No, maybe I just got it wrong, but because that was a hot discussion 2 years ago. Yes. Okay, then thanks a lot to all three of you for sharing your insights here. As said, this is just the start of sharing findings from the report and discussing them with colleagues and partners. And I want to announce already here the next event that we have planned. On 14th of September, we will have another webinar on Erasmus+. And that time we will look very closely at student mobility. Sabine mentioned already the survey, the ongoing survey of the European Student Network, and we will have them as partners here in the webinar and share results of both surveys and discuss them with you. And some of the issues that came up here, like how accessible is mobility for students, but also the virtual aspects. This will be at the heart of this presentation. So thanks everybody for joining here this afternoon. Thanks again for the three colleagues to come in here and share their insights, and have a good afternoon. And if I don't see you before, a good summer. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.